On our journey, we realised that we're in the middle of a great battle. We've talked about the great controversy, the black corner and the red corner. And where's the battlefield? According to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, right through our hearts, that's right, Ben. It's through everybody's heart, every human heart and each human heart. Paul uses the analogy of a race. The races that started in Greece, where all of the modern Olympics come from, and they were quite into it in Paul's day, because he was spending a lot of time in the area of Greece. Corinth is in Greece, and he says, "Know you not that they which run in a race run all, but how many receive the prize? One." He says, "So run that you may obtain the prize. And every man that strives for the mastery," this is in the race, this is in the long distance race, the short distance race, the wrestling, whatever it might be, "he's temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible." He says, "I therefore run not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beats the air." But he says, "I keep under my body and bring it into subjection." You understand what he's saying here? The people in a race take care of their body so that they can perform the best. He said, we're looking for an incorruptible crown, something way beyond just that wreath that the people would get that would fade away. He says to the people in Romans, "I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your what? Your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service." And there's a lot of focus in Scripture on the physical body. And when I was not in the body of Christ, I knew a few people that were Christians and they didn't seem to worry anything about their bodies. I was focused on that, on caring for the body, learning about cancer and all these other diseases. And it was a bit oxymoronic for me because the Christians didn't seem to care about the bodies, the physical body. So I'm entitling this, "Preparing for the Fight, God's Wellness Plan." You need to be the best you can be to go into a race, to go into a boxing match. The boxers just turn up on the day. No, they put massive amount of training in. And this is an amazing thing. The All Blacks used to have an edge because for 4 days before a test, they had to be vegetarian. They had to be on a plant-based diet. I told that to a friend in Australia and he said, "Oh, I don't believe that. You're making that up." And then I was over there a couple of years later, he said, "You're dead right. The biggest test that we had was between the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team, and the Wallabies, which is the Australian rugby team." Rugby's the game for the people in America that will be watching this. And they had the team staying in the same hotel. So the Australian team and the All Blacks were staying in the same hotel. My friend's sister was the maitre d' of the hotel, and she went in and talked to the captain of the Wallabies, and she said, "You are never going to beat those guys in there." That was a big test where they had 100,000 people at the ground. And he said, "Why is that?" And he said, because she said to him, "Because you guys are sitting here, you're eating burgers and drinking beer and Coke. The guys next door are eating salads and protein shakes." He said, "You're never going to beat them." And she was dead right. They didn't beat us. But we need to prepare for a game, for something where we're exerting ourselves physically. What about when we're in this battle that's got eternal consequences? Jesus said, "The thief comes not but to steal and to kill and to destroy." He said, "I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly." You know, before the fall, Jesus gave us 3 amazing gifts. If you read the Bible, the story of the Bible, there's the first 2 chapters where everything was perfect. And he gave us the perfect diet, Genesis 1:29. He gave us the 7th-day Sabbath as a gift for men to help them to find rest once a week. And he gave them marriage. Genesis 3, this guy gets his foot in the door. And what does he say? He says, "No, no, no." And those 3 things have been under attack ever since. The healthy diet that keeps humans in the best physical condition they could be in. The 7th-day Sabbath is under attack, as we'll see in another program. And marriage. Is marriage under attack? Or is it just me that's noticing that in our world today, marriage is under attack? I want to take you to the United Nations. Just do that again. I want to take you to the United Nations. This is the Russian ambassador, Vasily Nebenzia. He evoked the scepter of an uncontrolled spread of bioagents from the Ukraine. This is current. His American counterpart, Linda Thomas Greenfield, warned that Russia's claim could be a pretext for launching his own biological weapons attack on the Ukraine. We hear this rhetoric going on in our own governments, but with the United Nations. But she went on to say something. Thomas Greenfield said, "I will say this once, Ukraine does not have a biological weapons program." She went on to turn the accusation back on Moscow. It is Russia that has long maintained a biological weapon program in violation of international law. I'm not sure what she was talking about, but she was correct. Because we can go back to 1710, the Great Northern War between Russia and Sweden. In 1710, a Russian army fighting Swedish forces, they were barricaded in Reval, which is now Tallinn in Estonia, and they hurled plague-infested corpses over the city walls to infect the people on the inside of the city. That's biological warfare. But you know, they weren't the first to use it. We have to go back to 1347. And Janabeg Khan, part of the Golden Khanate, they were attacking a place on the Black Sea, on the Crimean Peninsula, which used to be part of Ukraine till quite recently. It says one of the first recorded uses of biological warfare occurred in 1347, when Mongol forces are reported to have catapulted plague-infested bodies over the walls into the Black Sea port of Kaffa. It's now Feodosia in the Ukraine. At that time, a Genoese trade centre, Genoese is Italian, trade centre in the Crimean Peninsula. This is a narrative of one of the people who was there at the time. This is a person, his contemporary narrative. He said, "Oh God, see how the heathen Tartar races pouring together from all sides suddenly invested the city of Kaffa and besieged the trapped Christians there for almost 3 years. But behold, the army was affected by a disease which overran the Tatars and killed thousands upon thousands every day. It was as though arrows were raining down from heaven to strike and crush the Tatars' arrogance. All medical advice and attention was useless." So these Mongols who were attacking Europe, they were taking their companions who had died from a disease and throwing them over the wall with catapults to try and infect the people on the inside. The Tatars died as soon as the signs of disease appeared on their bodies: swelling in the armpit or groin caused by coagulating humours, followed by a putrid fever. What was it that they were dealing with, friends? It's bubonic plague. The bubonic plague, a terrible curse. And I'll just show you on the map. This is Eurasia here, Europe and Asia, and this is right there where the circle is Kaffa, the Crimean Peninsula. And do you know what happened? 25 million people died because the people from Kaffa, the Genoese, when they got a chance, got in their ships and they fled. And they left the city to the Mongols. But they carried a worse disease, a worse enemy with them. They carried bubonic plague to all of Europe. That's how it got into Europe. One commentator says a pall of darkness hung over the world. Death lurked everywhere like a predator with an insatiable appetite. Do you know that's exactly what it was, friends? It was a predator with an insatiable appetite. Do you know what it was? It was this thing. It's a flea infected with Yersinia pestis. Yersinia pestis is bubonic plague. And that poor little flea is starving because the virus, the bug, has filled its stomach capacity, so it's starving. It can't digest anything. So it's insatiable for blood, so it's just going to bite anything it can. But for it to be able to eat, it has to vomit up what's in its stomach. So every time the flea bits you, you would get bubonic plague vomited into the site. Lovely, isn't it? The Bible has a phrase where it talks about to the Jew first. And there was something interesting during the bubonic plague. The Jews were not succumbing to the plague like everybody else. All the people around them, all the neighbours are dying, everybody's dying of the plague, but the Jews seemed to have some immunity to it. And people were claiming that they were following witchcraft. They were assigning to them all sorts of hideous reasons why they weren't dying, even blaming them for the disease. But the church caught on. They thought, what are the Jews doing? And this is from a medical document by George Rosen, The History of Public Health. It says, leadership was taken by the church as the physicians, the doctors, the hospitals had nothing to offer. They could do nothing about the bubonic plague. But the church stepped in, and the church took as its guiding principle the concept of contagion. As embodied in the Old Testament, this idea and practical consequences are defined with great clarity in the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus, friends, is one of the books that make up the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, written by Moses. They're known as the writings of Moses or the law, the Pentateuch. So they followed the counsel that Moses gave thousands of years before. And what was their methodology? What was it that the Jews were doing and then the church started implementing to save people from dying from bubonic plague? This is back in the 14th century. Sounds very up to date today. Have you heard of hygiene? You've heard of isolation? You've heard of quarantine? Is that a familiar word to us today? Contamination? Face coverings. They put masks on. And a strengthened immune system. But in Moses' writings, there was more that gave the Jews an advantage. They had a healthy immune system because of several things. One was a primarily plant-based diet. They had an abstinence from blood, eating blood, an abstinence from eating fat. They ate clean meats only if they ate meat. They made prodigious use of water and fresh air. They were opening the windows to let the fresh air in, while the doctors were saying close the windows and keeping the person in all the stale, filthy air that they were breathing in and out. No wonder they died. And to get adequate rest. These were in the writings of Moses. Let's go back 3,500 years ago to ancient Egypt. And we're told, as the children of Israel came out in that Exodus, that amazing Exodus story that inspired me to write What's to Know. It says there was not one feeble person among their tribes. How many people were there? About 2 million. Not one feeble person. And God promised them on that, as they came out in that Exodus journey at the very beginning, you shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. So is that just some miraculous wave of the hand and it didn't happen? No, friends, it was dependent on their obedience. And it says, if, well, it's a big little word, isn't it? I've still to work out whether it's a big little word or a little big word. But it's a powerful word. If you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, and will do that which is in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes. Commandments, we know what they are, thou shalt and thou shalt nots. But statutes are instructions on living. And he says, if you do that, if you obey those things, I will put none of these diseases upon you, which I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord God that heals you. What were the diseases? Let's jump forward to 1975. And Gary took you to the Valley of the Kings, where they found some mummies. That's after the pyramids were all robbed. They started burying the pharaohs and the rich people in the Valley of the Kings. And how many of those tombs got raided? All but one, remember, Tutankhamun. Well, Dr. Rosalie David in 1975 took some of these mummies and started to do autopsies on them. Some of the mummies dated back to 1900 BC. And I didn't realise there were so many mummies, but Claude Roffet, a Belgian, he did x-rays on 14,000 of them. 14,000 mummies. Tomorrow night we're going to see why they went through the process of mummification. What do you think the diseases were? It reads a wee bit like 2024 again, friends. Heart and vascular disease, biggest killer in New Zealand, cancer, arthritis, hepatitis, trichinosis. If you're not sure what trichinosis is, you'll know before we stop for a break. And tetanus, lockjaw. 3,500 years ago, they had some advanced medical practices compared to the rest of the world. We know from Luxor and Karnak that they've got imagery of surgical weapons. They could even do open head surgery. They could do brain surgery. But we've got a couple of papyri. We've got the Edwin Smith papyrus and the Ebers papyrus. These are scientific journals from the day. These journals are top shelf PhD material from the day. And they tell us about their medical practices, their interventory means. One was bloodletting. Now we know that bloodletting is positively dangerous to life and health. You know how George Washington died? They bled him to death. They kept taking blood and he wasn't getting better. They took more and more until he had none left and he still died. And they were so surprised. They were fairly ignorant just a couple of hundred years ago. Now, if you've got an eye problem, and I am not making any of this up, this is exactly what it says on these PhD documents, you pour hot broken glass into the eye. That solves the problem. Now, baldness, and I see there's probably a few men sitting up here thinking, oh, what's this one? The cure for baldness is to apply goose fat and crocodile dung. Now, sorry guys, we can get a bit of goose fat here, but crocodile dung's really hard to come by in New Zealand, so I can't help you with that. For snake bite, you drink water poured over an idol. For slivers embedded deeply, you rub in worm's blood and horse dung, a mixture of. So is it any wonder that they had tetanus and lockjaw, friends? This is what they believe to be the way to deal with disease. In the book of Acts, when Stephen is speaking, he talks about Moses. And he says when he was born, he was exceeding fair and he was nourished up in his father's house 3 months. And when he was cast out, Pharaoh's daughter took him up and nourished him for her own son. And Moses was learned in what? All the wisdom of the Egyptians. He would have known everything there was to know about alchemy, about geometry, about anatomy, about medical health. A genius could have easily known everything about all of the topics, all the sciences that were available to them. He was in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He knew what to do a bit with baldness. He knew what to do with a sore eye. But you know, Moses didn't include those things in the Bible. What if he had have? Would I be able to trust this book if it told you that if you got something wrong with your eye, you pour hot broken glass into it? Or for a snake bite, you just drink water poured over an idol? Moses didn't include any of that. And why didn't he? That's a question that came to my mind. Why did Moses not include the science of the day? And how did he know the stuff that he included in the Bible? How did he delineate between what was true and what was nonsense? There's only one explanation, friends. He was beyond the science of the day, completely contrary to the science of the day, and that has to be inspiration. It has to be inspiration from a higher source that knows how the body works, and I believe it's the creator of the body. Encyclopedia of Medical History says, the idea of contagion was foreign to the classic medical tradition and found no place in the voluminous Hippocratic writings. The Old Testament, however, is a rich source for contagious sentiment. What else did inspiration lead Moses to include in the Bible? What else? And I need to I don't have time to share a long story, but for me, I was studying human physiology and anatomy. Myself, I studied books on microbiology and biochemistry, trying to work out how this whole cancer thing works. And after 10 years of diligent study, I came to the conclusion that there was a perfect diet. There was a diet that was shown around the world and in epidemiological studies to be the one that would help you avoid disease. And if you did get disease, the consequences of symptomology would be way less. I went to the first Christian meeting I ever went to. A guy was talking about health, a lecture a bit like what I'm doing. And he took us to the Bible, and he took us to Genesis 1:29. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. It's a perfect diet. I'm sitting there thinking, what an idiot I've been. What a fool I've been. I've spent 10 years studying scientific articles that I needed a dictionary with me for every line to try and understand the language they were using. All I had to do was read 29 verses into this book and it was there. It was already there. And that led me on a journey. I started to think, well, what else did God have to say that's right? And that's why I'm here before you today, because I started to study the rest of the teachings of Scripture. But you know, Moses talked about clean and unclean foods. He talked about the animals that we can eat, the ones that are less dangerous. Anything that's an ungulate and a ruminant, meaning it's got a split hoof and it chews the cud, often multiple stomachs. And there was animals that you shouldn't, like the coney. And this is a coney or a rock hyrax. I photographed it at Mount Carmel in Egypt. And you're not supposed to have camel. So no camel burgers. Got time to just share a quick story with you. Does anybody know who this guy is? It's Francois Hollande. He was the president of France. And years ago, Mali, which used to be a protectorate of France, part of French Equatorial Africa, they got attacked by some Islamic terrorists. So Hollande sent their paratroopers in there, sent his paramilitary forces in there, and they resolved the problem. The problem was dealt with completely 100%, and they didn't have any problem with the terrorists anymore. So in response, the Malian government honoured him with the greatest gift that you can give to somebody in Mali, a camel. And he thought, there's not really room for that in the palace in Paris. He said, can somebody look after it for me? So they found a person with a farm not far from the capital, and they cared for the camel. And they rang up quite embarrassed I think it was about 18 months later. With great embarrassment, they had to tell the President of France that the people looking after his camel had eaten it. So they got him another one. The pig gets a pretty bad rap in the Bible, and maybe rightfully so, because pork. Now, I can tell you this, Moses had never heard of the term cholesterol, nor did he know about glycemic index or any of the science that we know today, but he said that you shouldn't eat the pig. It's got the highest cholesterol sources of all meats. It's got the highest fat content, and then Dr. McNaught, when he did research, found that 1 in every 4 had trichina worm in it, living trichina worm. Do you know what trichina worm is? It's a little worm that if you eat it and it's not dead, it burrows through your stomach line and gets into your bloodstream, can get into your brain, can get into your muscles, and causes a disease called trichinosis. And much of the myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME, Tapanui flu, can be really attributed to this. Do you know the only way to kill the trichina worm is when they cremate you? You cannot kill it. 1 in 4. I don't think I'd take that chance. God says that there's clean and unclean fish. Dr. Israel Macht, he's a pharmacologist and doctor of Hebrew literature in Baltimore, I think he was, responsible for many contributions to pharmacology during the first half of the 20th century. He did this experimental pharmacological appreciation of Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 12. Now, I don't have time to go into the whole experiment with you, but just give you an abbreviated version in which Macht used his phytopharmacology technique on samples of both levitically clean and unclean animals, and showed a markedly higher phytotoxic index for the unclean meats, and the correlation was 100%. Clean animals have a muscle toxin level of between 7 and 11. Unclean animals like your dog, your pig, your dog, your cat, your mouse, your snake, they're around 45 to 55. The pig is 85% to 95. And then shellfish is 95 plus. When it gets above 95, you get told not to eat it because it will kill you. And there wasn't one disagreement with what Moses said. How did he know that, friends? Somebody had to tell him. And then he talked about alcohol in the Bible. And he says that the Bible, with the effects of alcohol mentioned in the Bible, they are comparable with what's found in the current medical understanding. I think I would have written that and said the current medical understanding has finally caught up with what the Bible said, because the Bible said it first. He said the book of books is in complete accord with most modern and advanced experimental data on the subject. I believe we're just catching up. The Bible simply says wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. You know, alcoholism affects 1 in every 6 people that drink alcohol. Imagine if you had a dog that bit 1 in every 6 visitors. The council would come and take it off you. And our whole world is filled with alcoholism and drug addiction. Our country is rife. The young people in this country are being devastated by drug addiction. Do you know the deadliest weapons in our world today by the number of people killed? I want to show you what it is. It kills more people than any other weapon. It's the knife and fork. The knife and fork. The knife and fork leads to the biggest killers: heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, arthritis, osteoporosis, overweight, cholesterol, high PSA, prostate-specific antigen, and blood fats. That sounds like the rich people in Egypt. Same diseases. 3,500 years later, we haven't learnt much. One of the things that happened for me, once I went to that meeting and I realised that the Bible had the answer to the healthy diet all along. Didn't have to study biochemistry and microbiology and learn all these new words. But after that, I went and I checked out a couple of books, and one of them was this book here, the one that Mike showed you earlier, Ministry of Healing, and another book called Counsels on Diets and Foods, which just shows that the Bible has the answer. And I just learnt something not that many years ago. Somebody wrote a book about this book. He was a Jewish person from New York. His name is Robert Cohen. He's known as the Not Milkman. And he took some quotes from that little book, Ministry of Healing, and checked them with science, because when that book was written, many of the things that were said weren't known scientifically in the day. They were actually in contradiction to the science of the day. When that book was written, if you had a bronchial problem, you were prescribed cigarettes. This book was saying that cigarettes are an insidious poison. And he took half a dozen. No, friends, he didn't take a half a dozen, he took 20. No, not 20. Do you know how many statements he took from that book? 500, and showed that when in history science caught up. The last one was in 2012. And I was just blown away. I thought, how did she know that stuff? How could she know that stuff? The same way that Moses knew what to include in the Bible, to leave the nonsense out and include that which is scientifically valid. And it's only through inspiration. It's the same thing. I'd encourage you. There's only 4 of those books, and I'd encourage you to read it. 500 statements have been validated by science. God's not bound by science, friends. And Paul says, he's in closing to the Corinthians, one of his chapters, he says, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. Eating and drinking, everything we do can be to the glory of God, friends. Or maybe to the dishonour. He says, for you are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit. That word spirit can mean exactly what it means in Ephesians 4. And be renewed in the spirit of your mind. We need to be prepared for the battle we're in. And there's an enemy out there who wants to keep us dulled down, wants to have our brains thick, our blood thick, wants us to be disabled from thinking clearly, just immobilise our mental capacity, immobilise our physical capacity, so we're so busy worried about our sickness, we can't worry about the things of God. And who wins then? The red corner or the black corner? The black corner wants to dumb us down. And Paul says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. And he says, and be you not conformed to this world, but be you transformed by the renewing of your what? Your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The mind. We need to take good care of the body, but we need to take good care of the mind. How to do that? We'll find out when we do Mindcraft after the break.